Have to look around and see. I'm David Law, Superintendent of Schools, and we're here for our second community listening session at Sunrise Elementary, talking about addressing some overcrowding that's happened sooner than we had hoped in the school. In the room tonight, we're on Facebook Live too. Good evening. In the room tonight are our school board members, Chair Anderson, who represents this community, Vice Chair Hayes, board members Jeff Simon, Matt Audette, and Casey Deshane. We also have, as you'll hear from tonight, Principal Deb Shepard, Associate Superintendent for Elementary Schools Mary Wolverton, our Operations Officer Greg Cole, and our Chief Information Officer Joel Verdine. All of them work with boundaries and facilities, and specifically elementary school. We have our Director of Communications here tonight, Jim Skelly, who's making sure that we're capturing all this information, and a lot of our transportation folks they're the experts on where people live or they're going to be living and how we get people around the district. We're here for the second night. We had an information session just under a month ago and got a lot of great feedback, and you're going to see tonight that your feedback drove some of the decisions or some of the decision-making process to where we are tonight. We're going to run through a presentation, and then just like we did about a month ago, the best way to get feedback is to write it down because that gets compiled. Otherwise, you can ask questions to any of us that are here. And with that, I'll bring up Mr. Cole to kick the night off.
Thank you. So we're just going to take you through a few slides. If you were at the previous meeting, there'll be a little bit of a repeat, but we know that there may be people who are here this evening or watching us that weren't a part of the first presentation. So just bear with us if you've heard some of this before. But essentially the purpose of our presentation is to give you an update of enrollment and facility demands and options for Sunrise. Some background on past boundary adjustments that we've done here in Anoka-Hennepin School District. The growth in Blaine that has occurred that has impacted Sunrise Elementary School specifically in a very unique and different way than some of our other schools in the Blaine area. Community feedback and common themes, as Superintendent Law mentioned, we're just going to review some of those common themes that came out of the things that parents were telling us after our first meeting. The guidelines we use for our decision making and those processes and how important those are as we navigate a lot of different opinions that arise about how we solve these problems. And then the process and timeline, just a reminder where we are in that process and kind of what you can look forward to. So just a reminder, Anoka-Hennepin approved current elementary boundaries during the fall of 2018. Those boundaries were implemented for the fall of 2019, and at the elementary level are expected to last for 5 years, meaning 2019 through 2023. Sunrise Elementary School, though, experienced rapid growth in the attendance area, exceeding projections of both the city and the school district. So during the Fit for the Future process, city officials from Blaine joined us in that process, provided projections. We meet with the city of Blaine as well as a lot of our communities just for updates on housing starts and those sorts of things. So we knew that there was growth expected in Blaine. That's the reason that an elementary school was put here in the first place. However, the growth exceeded both the city's expectations, our expectations. It accelerated quickly. We do believe that the pandemic played a role in that. Interest rates were exceptionally low, and some of the homes that were built in the attendance area specifically for Sunrise were oftentimes homes thought of as second homes, multiple bedroom homes with higher dollar values. What we found was, which was different than in the past, is those were starter homes for many families because interest rates were so low. The other thing is just the acceleration of, I guess, sod or farmland north of the school wasn't necessarily expected in certain parts. So the current enrollment of Sunrise is 1135, and that has exceeded the building capacity to meet board-approved class size ratios. Of the following Blaine cluster elementary schools, McKinley, Johnsville, Madison, Jefferson, and Sunrise. Only Sunrise has experienced significant gain in enrollment. So what you're looking at here, we use October 1 counts as a benchmark, and part of that has to do with what the Department of Education asks us to report. And so if you look at this, you'll notice the 2019 October 1 counts for the schools I mentioned versus the 2021 October 1 counts. In the Blaine area, and McKinley is in Ham Lake, but we're talking about Blaine cluster schools, you notice that from 2019 to 2021, October 1 counts, in all those schools, the enrollment actually dropped. However, Sunrise during the same period of time increased by nearly 18%. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Principal Deb Shepard, who will talk about the future of the process.
Thank you. So I'll review the options that we presented at the last meeting. One of the options was to utilize additional space at Roosevelt Middle School, utilize additional space at Johnsville Elementary, and then at the last community meeting, we solicited feedback for some potential other ideas that would work with the existing space in the district. So as we look at the option to have students, next year's fifth graders go to Roosevelt, that option would include the entire fifth grade class, approximately 180 students. Those students would be in a common area of the school, meaning it would be separate from the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I think I had mentioned at the last meeting, currently there's a preschool in that area, and so it would model what that section of the building looks like. Students would be able to enroll at Roosevelt, continuing on through 8th grade if this were the option to be selected. So based on the community feedback, these were kind of the major themes in relation to the concerns. So we know that our current 4th graders have already had a number of transitions. They joined Sunrise from someplace else. We also heard about the challenges with the pandemic and kids going from distance learning to hybrid learning to in-person learning, and recognize that those are additional transitions that the students experience since they've been here at Sunrise. A lot of concern was expressed regarding transportation and having 5th graders ride the school bus with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Another concern was that difference in bell time with the middle school hours being different than elementary. And just how would that work at Roosevelt? A lot of questions about the classroom locations, recess, cafeteria, media center. So we looked through all of that feedback. So the current status of considering Roosevelt Middle School is based on those concerns that were shared through that feedback process, and as we looked at those concerns, we are recommending that this option be removed for consideration. So we know that the school board will make their decision on February 28th, but when we go back to the board at the end of the month, that would be one of our non-recommendations, I guess is how we would say it. So the other option presented was to utilize space at Johnsville Elementary. For that, we would move approximately 120 kindergarten students to do their kindergarten year at Johnsville, and then they would come back to Sunrise for 1st grade. Moving about 120 students gives us 6 classrooms, which is the same amount of classrooms if we would have moved the 5th graders. So that gives us the space for us to be within those recommended class size ranges. We know that at Johnsville, they offered the same curriculum and programs that we do here at Sunrise. And the goal is that the attendance boundaries would be by neighborhood for those students that would be impacted. And we do want to acknowledge that there were also concerns from the community regarding kindergarten, that transition from kindergarten back to first grade here at Sunrise, and then, the potential for another transition when the boundary process unfolds district-wide. Transportation concerns, because if you have a kindergarten student, you do like them to ride the bus with a sibling. We know that families prefer consistency, to have everybody under one roof. And a big question is, how are students going to be selected? And alternate bell times. How does the schedule impact daily life, bus times, after school times, et cetera? So those were concerns brought forward from the community that we are processing through. So as we look at this, how would transportation work? Which neighborhoods are involved with this option? I can share that, like I said before, approximately 120 students closest to Johnsville, a neighborhood-based 120 students in a neighborhood cluster that best meets the planning criteria. Morning direct route to Johnsville, and afternoon shuttle to Sunrise so that they ride home with their siblings. And can you go back to I wanted to add something about A+. So if this is the proposal that's accepted by the school board, if your students are involved with A+, they would come to Sunrise for morning A+. They would, Sunrise would be a bus stop, so to speak, for the students that go to Johnsville for kindergarten. Then they would come back here at the end of the day to do A+, to be picked. So the family would only have one drop-off and one pickup point. Does that make sense? So that's how that would look if the kindergarten option is selected. And now Dr. Mary Wolverton will talk about additional steps.
Thank you. One additional, I think with the kindergarten consideration, there were also some feedback relative to creating a kindergarten center. And I know as a district we've had that a number of years ago with Peter Enich and Parkview, but that takes a significant body of time for us to get that in place. So we are focusing on this one. With the kindergarten option, we would look at additional steps. One would, as we are doing, and Infosys is here, the department, we would continue to do what we do this time of year for all 26 schools, and that is evaluate incoming kindergarten registration. We would also finalize the attendance area if the kindergarten option is selected. And then there would be a communication to families. And we would do that in a time-sensitive process shortly after the school board decision on February 28th. Our goal as a district team would be to have that communication to families within the first couple of weeks of March. So we would be able to communicate to families if their attendance area is selected for kindergarten to Johnsville, and it would also be in a time manner where we would be able to have them attend open house at the school that their kindergarten student would be attending. Additional considerations and suggestions. One was, and this is going back to, as Deb noted, some of the common themes, could you conduct an elementary boundary adjustment now? And limiting the transitions and provide certainty for families. So in that, when we go through a boundary process, a comprehensive boundary process, it really is a body of time that we start and work with gathering input and feedback from all communities, all sites, all families, and work with various departments. In that, one of the things that we are considering, not for next year, but another suggestion, which was, could you look at a fall 2022 decision on boundaries to be implemented the fall of 2023? And so that is something that the team is bringing forward as well in conversations with the school board. So if that were brought forward and approved, rather than a commitment to 5 years on the boundary process, the boundaries, it would be 4 years. So whatever option is selected would be for 1 year. The other consideration was consider sending Sunrise fourth grade students to Johnsville and have them stay there for 2 years. As we looked at that, we looked at the number of students that are in the current third grade class, and that is too large of a group for us to be able to send to Johnsville for 2 years. Additional consideration was, could you consider sending fifth grade students to Johnsville Elementary rather than Roosevelt? And I think that is aligned to some of the concerns brought forward regarding having fifth graders at a 6th, 7th, 8th grade campus. And the other consideration was maintain the current Sunrise attendance area as is and take actions to make it work within the school until a boundary change can happen. So we'll give a little more information on that. So with Sunrise fifth grade to Johnsville, the current status of this option, recommended as an option to consider and pass feedback, space available at Johnsville and may provide some relief in transitions due to the families' familiarity of the school for some of our current fourth graders that'll be fifth graders next year. We reviewed the impact of 180 additional students on core areas such as the lunchroom at Johnsville. As the team is meeting, we also have the principal from Johnsville in our meetings, so he's providing input for us as well in terms of facility challenges and demands with these options. The other piece that we looked at with this is the consideration, and this was a common theme from the community, consideration of the number of transitions our current fourth graders have had that will be fifth grade next year. Sunrise stay in place option, as was noted previously, currently the enrollment at Sunrise is 1,135 students. I believe, Deb, our projection for next year is 1248. So when we looked at that, we looked at considering that would mean we would have potentially 53 classrooms we would need versus 46 that are available. Parallel to that, we also talked about that. In doing that, we would have to have all of our specialists teach off of a cart with no assigned classrooms, such as art or music. The other piece that we would look at that we've talked about that has presented considerable challenges is lunchroom capacity with numbers of students in a grade level over 200 and potentially 240, trying to get them all through the lunch line. Currently at this time we have high numbers of students. I think the highest percentage that we've experienced all choosing hot lunch. So we would have challenges with that. Lunchroom overcrowding accommodations, and we would maybe need to look at bag lunches being served as the only option. And then class sizes, K-5, would exceed our guidelines for class size ratios. And I will turn it over to Dr. Verdine.
Thank you. So as we're looking forward into how this process wraps up, as was mentioned a couple of different times, we will, as an administration, make recommendations back to our school board for what we think are the most viable options. for this, and we will be working on a decision in the February 28th meeting. The items that we are using as our guiding principles to help us with these decisions, some of them are certainly above principles and must-dos. State and federal guidelines, any laws that we have to follow around attendance areas, efficient use of our district resources, and so as we're vetting through various options, transportation and how far spread out it is, whether or not that's going to impact other routes and things all need to be taken into consideration. You heard Dr. Wolverton talk about our class size ratios. So as a school district, our board has given us ratios that we try to make sure that we stay within. We will once in a while have unusual situations where that may fluctuate a little bit, but by and large across all of our elementary schools, we only want our kindergartens to be so big. We only want our first grades to be so big. And so we try to make sure that we maintain those class size ratios across our schools. Lastly, we are doing the best that we can to provide maximum stability for these students, being cognizant of listening to the concerns that you've mentioned about the transitions they've had. Certainly, we've learned, particularly in the last meeting, to take into consideration the changes that our students have taken over the last 3 years as being something that has been hard for many of our students to experience, something that we originally weren't putting at the forefront of our thoughts, but we want to make sure that we're cognizant of reducing the amount of transitions to the extent that we can in making this decision. Feedback from our community meeting, online forum and email communications are continuing to be the things that we're using to weigh as we're looking at these decisions. As mentioned, school board decision on February 28th, and communications about potential adjustments would be shared, as we mentioned earlier. Our guide for that, we're trying to make sure that that happens in the first couple weeks of March, and that communication would be sent out to families so that everyone would be notified of the changes. Through this time and all the way up through the point where we have a board meeting, we'll continue to take feedback from you. There is an email address that you can use to reach us, boundaries@AH Schools. The website, ahschools.us Sunrise, which is the Sunrise Elementary School website, I believe. Heather? Yep, oh, thank you. Has both the overview, the frequently asked questions, all of the things that we've been gathering from people, as well as video presentations, recordings of things that we've done, so that if there is an interest in going back, if you missed maybe a previous meeting and there's more information that you want to follow up on, those pieces of information can be found there. Superintendent Law began by letting you know that there are a multitude of people here from the district that are in the room. We have our school board members over here. Superintendent Law is in the back corner. Our transportation department and enrollment department are over here in this corner. Principal for the schools over here. And our buildings and grounds, chief operations officer, associate superintendent, and myself, we're all available to you now. For questions, should you have those, if you want to give us written feedback, there's a number of laptops set up in the back that you can submit written feedback for as well. And with that, I will finish the presentation and leave it up to you if you want to ask different people a variety of questions.